Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Daly Flanagan, and I'm the Executive Director at the Rockland Center for the Arts. Tonight's program is part of our new ongoing series, the Luminary Artists of Rockland. Artists that will be featuring later on in the spring will include Richard Poussette Dart, Shari Deans, and Arthur B. Davies. I wanted to give thanks to M&T Bank for their generous sponsorship of this series, and to just take a moment to thank Jean Richards, who has so generously agreed to do a talk about her mother, Eva Zeisel. We're thrilled. I feel as though there are so many of Eva's designs that people are familiar with, but not realize are hers. So I'm excited for, and I'm sure everyone present tonight is, very familiar with her work, but I'm just constantly amazed at how prolific she was and how designs that I've lived with my whole life were created by her. And like so many seminal artists, there's so much to learn about Eva Zeisel. It's my honor to introduce Jean Richards. She's an author and an actress who will be speaking with us tonight about her mother.
Thank you so much, Daly, for arranging this. And I wanted to tell you that Eva has a long-standing relationship with the Rockland Center for the Arts. And what I just learned was that many years ago, when she was part of a group exhibit, she spur of the moment invited all the artists and the staff, and probably the guests, home to the house. And she served them dinner, and I learned, on real plates. So she has a long-standing relationship with you, and a very fond relationship. So I'm talking from this house on South Mountain Road in New City, which Eva bought in the 50s. And she was looking in this area because her brother had bought a house nearby in Pomona, known as the Stryker property, now question mark. And she wanted the children, the cousins, to live near each other in the summer and enjoy the summer together, which actually happened. So she was looking in this neighborhood. She came upon this house, which was kind of falling apart and not winterized or anything, but around the back on the mountainside, it was overgrown with wild roses, pink roses. It was like Sleeping Beauty's castle, and she fell in love with it, and she bought it. And that summer, my father had been on a business trip in England, and when he came back, he said, "Oh, Eva, I really splurged. I bought a whole set of leather suitcases." And she said, "You think you splurged? I bought a house," which she did. And the house reminded her of a magic place that she had grown up in. They had a house in Budapest on a lot of property when she grew up. And the house was kind of plain, and there was a gardener's house, but the land was incredible. It was on a hillside overlooking, I guess it was in Buda, overlooking Pest. And it had been bought from the former gardener of Budapest, I think. And it had on it vineyards and fruit trees of every kind, and gardens for flowers, and a grotto. And Eva spent a lot of her time there, and sometimes slept outside. And starting maybe age 8 or 9, she started to sketch out there, and she sketched and became a painter. She went to the Royal College, Royal Academy of Fine Arts in Budapest, and was tutored at home. And there was no question that she was going to be a painter. And now you'll see some of her drawings and paintings.
He's talking. You see Jean.
You can see when you get to them.
Jean is here.
There we go. That's a sketch which she did in grade school of one of her teachers. The next is a painting she did of her younger brother, George. And the third, obviously it was taken much later, but in the background you see the portrait, the self-portrait that she did when she was in her 20s.
You can do it. It's fine.
Guys, I'm hearing you. I don't know if I'm supposed to. I'm hearing you converse. Anyway, so there was no question that she was going to be a painter. And she had a discussion with her mother about her future as a painter and thought that perhaps to starve in a garret painting was not how she wanted to spend her future. So her mother and she decided that she should learn a trade to be able to support herself. So she joined the last Potters Guild in Hungary, in the guild system. The master potter was named Mr. Karapancsik. And his the name of the guild I had to write down was the Guild of Chimney Sweeps, Oven Setters, Roof Tilers, Well Diggers, and Potters. And there she learned about clay from the ground up. She mushed it with her feet to get it the right consistency and worked on the wheel and watched the kiln and went with the master's wife to the market to sell the wares. And after 6 months, she had her examination to pass from an apprentice to a journeyman. And at that point, Mr. Karapancsik made a suggestion that perhaps she should bring a demijohn of wine from the vineyards at home for the judges. I'm sure that helped. And she graduated as a journeyman. And then she made her own pottery on the family property. And the next picture, you will see her with her work. And she fired these pieces in an underground wood-fired kiln. Let's see if you see it. There's Eva with her work. After a little while, she decided she needed a job. So she put an ad in the newspaper and it said, journeyman potter trained from the ground up, looking for a job. And indeed, she accepted a job in Hamburg in a small shop. And when she arrived in Hamburg, by the way, this shop was right next to the red light district, which was quite an eye-opener for a proper young lady. And when she arrived there, there were 4 turntables. 3 rough guys were working at 3 of them. And on the 4th, which was hers, was, as she liked to put it, a perfectly formed clay male organ. But what she did was she just pushed it aside. And I guess that gave her credibility with the other guys. And she hung out with them. She had beer with them. And she met other people that she had introductions to in Hamburg. And after a few months, the master there, the owner, noticed that she really wasn't very good at making things exactly the same, height and exactly the same. And he was about to fire her when he discovered that she could make things very different. And the next pictures you'll see are some of the things she designed at the Hamburg factory, Hamburg shop. They're a little strange, like that tea set. And this little horse. And this was an ashtray and you with a donkey on it. And another strange tea set. And a lantern. And this, she painted the decoration herself on this. And after a while, she left there. And after a break, she answered an ad for the Schramberger Majolika Fabrik, which was a factory with about 250 workers in a small town in the Black Forest. And she accepted the job. She got the job. And on the way on the train, a friend of hers taught her how to use a compass and a protractor and a ruler to design, because up till then she had just made things with her hands out of clay. And when she arrived there, they asked her, do you want to design on paper or do you want to make clay models? And she said, well, design, of course. So for the next 1.5 years, She kept 250 workers busy with many designs. She said she once figured that about 225 of her pieces actually made it to the market. And she designed, as you will see, things in using geometry. But she used geometry in a playful way. She felt that the Bauhaus, which used geometry also, took itself very seriously, and she used it in a playful way. In fact, these are some of the things she designed there. This is in the permanent collection of the Metropolitan Museum. It's a thing that goes on your desk for the ink and the pen. And you'll see that these are all kind of geometric. When I say playful geometry, using it in a playful way, I have to tell you that her motto in all her designs was the playful search for beauty. There was always playfulness and there was always a search for beauty. And the other theme was that she always designed her pieces as a gift for others, for the user. She did not believe in all this self-expression stuff. And she left there after almost 2 years. And I think the reason is that they refused to put her name on the bottom of the pieces she designed, which shows that she already knew how important that was. And her very next job was what she called the most elegant time of my life. Her mother had rented a studio in Berlin. This would have been around 1930. And she rented it for Eva and for her brother, Michael. And it had been the studio of the painter Emil Nolde. And the studio was, which we'll see a picture of, the studio was a block away from the Romanisches Café, which was a cafe where all the intelligentsia of, here is the atelier. And the Romanische Café is where all the intelligentsia came and discussed things about the world. And often they would end up in this apartment. And sometimes they gave parties with 100 people there. This is what Eva, you can show, this is what Eva looked like at the time, although she looked sort of serious in this. And apparently she savored all the amusements of Weimar Berlin, which was quite a contrast to the little room she had lived in for almost 2 years in the Black Forest. And the people who would come to her party were the intelligentsia. They were scientists and artists and theater people and journalists. And it was very exciting. Some of the people who came were Arthur Koestler, the writer, whom she had known since they were in kindergarten together and later were lovers, but remained friends their whole lives. And Leo Szilard, who later had a patent for the atomic bomb, and 2 men whom she would later marry sequentially. One was her friend Alex Weisberg, a physicist and an engineer, and the other was my father, Hans Zeisel, who was a good-looking young lawyer. And while she was exploring Berlin, she felt that it was very decadent. It was 3-penny opera time, and there was a lot of poverty and a lot of contradictions. It was Weimar Berlin. And in contrast to the paintings of George Gross, for example, the things that came from Russia, she felt were very fresh and new. And for example, the children's books were very beautiful, and the music and the theater and the mosse of dancers. And being the adventurous that she was, she wanted to see what was behind the mountain and take a trip to Russia. She was actually going to just stay a few weeks. But you couldn't go to Russia so easily at that time. So you couldn't get in. So she went as the fiance of her friend Alex Weisberg. He had gone there some months earlier because he was building an institute for physicists in Kharkov. So she arrived in Russia, and I'm going to show you a picture of her in Russia surrounded by scientists. And I show it for two reasons. One is that these scientists helped to save her life later on, which I'll tell you about later. But the other is there was just a wonderful anecdote which she always told. She was having dinner with these really the top scientists in Russia, world famous scientists, which were there because of the institute that Alex was building for them. And in the middle of dinner, their housekeeper ran out and said, "Oh my God, something terrible has happened. The kitchen sink has cracked." So one by one, these world famous scientists, I think one was named Landau, others, one by one, they went into the kitchen to give their expert opinion on why the sink had cracked, the stresses and strains and whatever. And after they went home after dinner, the housekeeper came out and she said, "What kind of physicists are those? Physicky, schmizzicky, I sat on this sink." And I like that anecdote. So that was the scientists that they hung out with. By that time, Eva was actually already hired by the Kharkov, the Ukrainian Glass and China Trust. And the first thing they did was send her out to see far off factories on the edges of the country to evaluate their abilities. And she told stories about going in midnight in the snow in a horse-drawn carriage covered by a blanket with the wolves howling left and right. And she had all kinds of adventures there. And eventually they sent her to design in the Imperial Porcelain Factory, known as the Lomonosov Factory. And later she set up an art department in the Duleva factory, which is one of the largest in the world. And we can see some of the things now, the slides of the things she designed in Russia. And at the end of this time, she actually became the artistic director of the Russia, China, and glass industry. Here are some of her designs there.
I've been able to log in, huh?
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
Okay, good.
This design, I'm sorry, I do hear you. This design was probably decorated by one of the suprematists, both of whom, Suetin and the other guy, knew Eva Malevich and her work. This was a teapot, part of a set she designed for the Lomonosov factory. And the next one you see it with a nice decoration, a bird on it. And much later, they used the same teapot, they decorated it. They used it to celebrate the opening of the subway system. And I believe that may be Stalin on it. That was not part of Eva's design plan. This was a lamp designed to save metal. And the next slide was, they had asked her to try to standardize the industry, and these were her ideas for standardization. So at this point, she was the artistic director, and she had just gotten an assignment. Oh, what's that? It's very interesting. What is that? Anyway, we'll get back to me. She had gotten an assignment to design some perfume bottles. And the perfume bottles were for Mrs. Molotov, who was supposed to, guys, I'm seeing some totally different person, just to let you know. One of the people watching, I think, on the telephone. Anyway, so she was supposed to design perfume bottles for Mrs. Molotov. She was supposed to resurrect or arrange a luxury industry of cosmetics for Russia. And then one day, at 4 a.m, she was arrested. Daly, I think we should go back to you because I'm seeing a very nice gentleman whom I don't know, but he's one of the watchers. Okay, so she was arrested. And she had no idea why. We can hold on this one. She had no idea why, because she was totally apolitical. She said, I traveled in my life as a tourist, as an observer. And she thought it was a mistake and she'd be out in a few days. And she didn't know what she was accused of. And they said to her, you've been accused of a successful attempt on the life of Stalin, of assassinating Stalin. And she said, how could it be successful? He's alive. And they said, don't make bad jokes. The truth is, she was not out in a few days. She was out in 16 months. And what had happened was this. A colleague of hers, a former colleague at one of the factories, a chemist, had been arrested as part of one of the early show trials. And his life had been threatened. They said to him, we'll shoot you, or we'll shoot your wife, who was also arrested, unless you give us names, give us names. And he was scared to death, and he gave names, his uncle, his grandfather, and Eva. And Eva's model maker, whom he said she hired because he was such a good shot. And Eva spent the next 16 months in prison, a year in solitary confinement. She thought she was the only innocent one, but of course everybody was innocent. She was not tortured physically, but she was interrogated no end in an attempt to have her give a false confession. And this book, which you saw, the red book, are her memoirs from Russia and from the prison. They are available on that list I hope you got of sources. And it turned out that she told all her experiences to her friend Arthur Koestler, and he used them as a basis for his famous book, Darkness at Noon. Not only many details, but the main character was based on someone she knew. And after Russia, I'm sorry, are you saying something to me? Anyway, after Russia, she went back to Vienna to recover. She said, you can't imagine how totally kaput I was after being in prison. I'm sorry, I'm again seeing somebody else instead of my friend Daly. There we go, that's the book that you can get as an ebook with her memoirs, and that's her actual mug shot on it. So after prison, she was, we found out recently actually that Stalin had a personal interest in her case. She was considered a very dangerous criminal, and her expulsion papers, she finally got out of prison, partly because her mother and Alex did everything they could, partly because those scientists that she had met and hung out with at Alex's vouched for her innocence, which was a very serious thing because it meant that they would share whatever fate she had. And every day she was in prison, she thought she was going to be shot. Every time she was called out, she thought she was going to be shot. This slide comes a little later, Daly. Anyway, her expulsion papers were signed by Wyszynski, Andrei Wyszynski, who was the chief prosecutor and Stalin's right-hand man. Then she went to Vienna. There was her family, and Hans was there to recover. And she was completely, she had no sense of self. She had no will. She was totally, as she said, kaput. Some months later, Hitler decided he was going to come into Austria, and she said, "That's it. I could not stand one more trauma." And the same day he came into Austria, she got on a train and made her way to England, where later my father joined her. They got married in England, and they sailed for America. In 1936 with exactly $64 between them. And she said when she saw the Statue of Liberty that the tears came to her eyes. It was such a welcoming sight. And her brother, the striker brother of Stryker property fame, had come a bit earlier. So they were there to welcome my parents, and they stayed with them for a little while. Now, Eva needed work. So the very first thing she did was to go to the public library, find the trade magazine, I think it was called Crockery and Glass, make an appointment with the editor, and she said to the editor, "I've just arrived. I'm a very good designer. Do you have any ideas for me?" And indeed, that led to her very first job, which was making she said miniatures. I think it might have been a miniature tea set for children. Anyway, it got her $100. And then the next job had something to do with making plaster models of the Himalayas, possibly as a backdrop for a movie. And that was done in the shop, the plaster shop in Pratt Institute, which brought her to the attention of the head of the industrial design department at Pratt Institute, who invited her to teach a course there. And she taught there for the next 15 years. But she invented the course that she taught. It had never been taught before, and it was called Ceramics for Industry. And the students started their designs and their models in class, but she wanted them to see how their pieces were seen through to production. So you can see the next picture if you can get to it. It's that one exactly. So she hooked up with a factory in Trenton, New Jersey, the Bay Ridge factory, and they took these designs through to production. And two of the well, this was Eva's design at the Bay Ridge factory, but the previous picture was Eva with her students' designs. There's Eva with her students' designs. A couple of these sets actually were made to be sold on the market, that of the student work. And there was an exhibition of the student work. I don't know if Eva's work was in the same exhibition, I believe at Rockefeller Center. And one of the people who saw the exhibition was Elliot Noyes, who was from the Museum of Modern Art. And he also went to a lecture that Eva gave on this topic of ceramics for industry. And at that time, the Museum of Modern Art wanted to have a new dinnerware set, a very elegant heirloom set made in porcelain by Castleton China, approved by them. And it was supposed to be the first undecorated porcelain set after the war. And he offered Eva the job. And it ended up with this beautiful set called the Museum Shape, made by Castleton China, which was indeed a very expensive, very elegant heirloom kind of set. And here it is. And the museum had to approve every piece, but they never asked for changes. They just didn't include everything. And this set, they gave a one-woman show in 1946 at the Museum of Modern Art. Eva was the first woman to get a one-woman show at MoMA. And here you see the exhibition. It's on the first floor. You can look out into the garden. And the next two pictures show the exhibition of the Castleton China set. This exhibition got a lot of publicity, and according to Eva, it put her on the map as a designer. And she participated in MoMA roundtable discussions, etc. And that led to, here we are back at the Castleton China. Now, her next assignment was very strange. It was from a small factory on the Mississippi in Red Wing, Minnesota, and they asked her to design a Greenwich Village-y set. She thought that was sort of odd that they would be interested in a Greenwich Village-y set, but she gave it to him. And when she went out to visit the factory, as she always did, She went fishing in the Mississippi with the owner, fishing for catfish. So here is the next set. It's called the Town and Country set. The iconic Salt and Peppers were part of it. And it came in many colors and many shapes, mix and match. And here you see it. And on the last slide, you'll see that the bowl is higher coming up here on one side than the other. And that was intentional. And all the dinner plates were also a little higher on one side than the other. And after this set, her next set she designed was the most successful set she's ever done. It was called Hall Craft. It was made by the Hall China Company in East Liverpool, Ohio. It was not expensive. It was made of earthenware. And one year it was the best-selling set in the United States. It came out with many decorations eventually, not under Eva's aegis, most of them. But this was the well-known Hall Craft set. And you can see its various pieces here. It's pretty. Now this set, by the way, has been reproduced and is for sale through the Eva Zeisel originals that her grandson Adam runs, because they found the original molds and they made the set from the original molds. She continued designing, I would say, for the next 25 or 30 years, and I want to show you just a smattering of her designs, a potpourri of the designs for the next 25 years. Here's her going to the factory in Monmouth, Illinois, and picking out the clay that they should use from the mountain, and working with the model maker in the factory, as she almost always did. You can see the bird in the background. She once said that when you put your hands in clay, it's hard not to make a bird. These were the serving pieces for this set. Here she is in the small town of Monmouth, Illinois. Birdie teapot with babies. She always designed in relationships, never a piece by itself. She said the pieces all had to be cousins, at least. This was very early. This was war wear. This chair is in the permanent collection of MoMA. This was on every pancake house table for a while, early on. Eva didn't distinguish, this is a children's toy, between, she thought everybody could appreciate beauty, wherever they came from, whatever their socioeconomic status, they could appreciate beauty. This is children's eating set. A graphic for the tea center. This was made in Riverside, California. This was made in Hickory, North Carolina. And these were space dividers made in Italy, which have belly buttons on them. I don't know if you can see them. Belly buttons was a theme that Eva used often in her designs. Now, In the 1960s, Eva became political for the first time in her life, passionately political, and it was for in demonstrations against the Vietnam War and the invasion of Cambodia. She drove us down to all these demonstrations, and she photographed the people, and it was on purpose because at the time, the press said, oh, the ones who were against the war were just hippies and fringe groups. And she wanted to show with her pictures that they were not only hippies and fringe groups, but a lot of straight arrow people of all ages and with their families. And she took lots of pictures of these demonstrations and was very active politically for the very first time in her life. At that point, she stopped designing. She stopped designing because, among other reasons, the whole industry in America kind of closed down, probably because of competition from abroad, from Asia probably, and the whole thing kind of ground to a halt. But she hooked on to a history project, which she researched from original sources all over the world, pre-computer, for the next, I would say, 10, 12 years. And it had a connection to her interest in it, had a connection to what had happened to her in Russia. This was something that took place in 1741 in New York City. A whole bunch of fires broke out one winter, and the townspeople, the upright townspeople, blamed the slaves. They thought it was the slaves had done it on purpose. And it was absolutely horrible. They had these show trials for these slaves, and it ended up with 13 slaves burned alive, 18 plus 4 white people hanged, and 52 slaves transported to the colonies to work in the fields, which guaranteed them a short life. And according to Eva's research, all of the fires were accidental, and all these people were innocent. And the parallel was that perfectly nice, upstanding citizens, including her interrogator, whom she said I would have invited to dinner, that these people found ways to interrogate and threaten people to give false confessions, resulting in their deaths. And this was what she found in her research. And she would have been very happy to know that the New York Historical Society has accepted her papers on this topic. Then she went back to designing. In 1982, she got a grant from the National Endowment of the Arts to go to Hungary. And I guess it was to look around, whatever, but she could never be kept from designing. So she immediately designed for 2 factories in Hungary. And she, one of the sets she designed is now for sale on Design Within Reach. And I want to show you the next slides because she continued designing till the end of her life. And again, this is just a smattering of her designs for the next 80, she died at 2011, so the next 30 years. Here is the Hallcraft set, which has been redone. So this was done after the 80s. She worked on furniture. This is upstairs in this house, in her studio. You can see birds if you look very carefully. There's mommy and baby birds. This table was sold at Design Within Reach. No longer, but it was. This is being sold by Klein Reed. It has little vases. If you go back one second, you can't see it here, but on the sugar bowl and the teapot on the lid is a little vase where you can put water in and flowers. I'm sorry, go ahead. These are also pine reed. These are Eva with some rugs behind her that the rug company made. They still have one of them, one of the designs. These were designed for Gumps in San Francisco. And these are wine glasses brought out by Nambe. Oh, these were some Christmas decorations she designed that were carried in the MoMA gift store, and these were advertised in the subway. Made in Portugal. She designed in many countries, in Portugal and Italy and Germany and Japan and India and all kinds of places. Oh, these are the lamps, the hanging lamps that Leoco's making. These are also still available. This flatware was made earlier, sold at Crate and Barrel, but now is being reproduced. And again, Adam is selling it at Eva Zeisel Originals. And this is the nicest. This was designed when she was 100 years old, part of a set called 101. Maybe she was 101 years old. And this bowl is officially called the Rockland Bowl, appropriately so. Now, in the year 2000, Eva was invited back to Russia, and she was invited to visit the factory where she had worked in the 1930s. And she, first of all, she said, I'm way too old to travel by myself. She was in her 90s. I need to take my daughter, my son-in-law, and my granddaughter, which we, of course, went. But she also said, I'm not going to Russia until I get a letter, because I was expelled from Russia and I have to get a letter that it's okay to go back. She did. She got the letter exonerating her and saying, of course, she was innocent and she was welcome back. So we went and visited the factory where she had worked, the Lomonosov factory. She toured the factory and met an old man who had been a young boy when she had been there in the 30s. And it turned out he was the only person in the factory to have survived the siege of Leningrad. Everybody else died of starvation. Anyway, at the factory, she immediately sat down with their model maker, Georgy Bogdovich, and started designing because, of course, she loved designing and it was very hard to call to stop her from doing it. So here she is in this picture working with Georgie, and she designed, they started the set there, and a couple of years later, they sent Georgie over to this house, to the studio, to finish the samples. And here it is. This is the cup, and this is the set. And it is, I think, the most beautiful set she's ever done. And a rather amazing thing happened in Russia. When she was arrested, there was a well-known, famous sculptress working at the factory named Natalia Danko. And at that time, you didn't want anything to do with somebody who had been arrested. They took Eva's name off anything she had designed. It was poison to be connected with anyone who was arrested. But Natalia made a medallion out of plaster or porcelain with Eva's face on it. And she hid the medallion in the back of a drawer because you couldn't, that would have been terrible to have made it public in any way. So it was hidden. And when we were in Russia, we found it. It had been hidden from 1930s to the year 2000, and you will see a picture of it. I think. And this this medallion actually has been reproduced since then. Here's the medallion that was hidden, and that was, of course, what she looked like in the 30s. So that was an amazing discovery. And Eva lived here till 2011. She died at the age of 105 in the last day of 2011. And at the very end of her life, a journalist came and asked her if she had any regrets. And she thought a long time. And then she said in a very quiet voice, "I should have been a painter." Now I'd like to tell you a little bit about, just a few minutes about what it was like growing up with Eva. First of all, her studio was in the basement of the building where we lived on Riverside Drive. So we lived on the 5th floor overlooking the river, and the studio was in the basement. And you'll see some pictures of the studio. It was a lovely studio, and we were always welcome in the studio after school. We'd go down there. There was also, here is the studio. There was a talk back between the studio and the 5th floor where we lived. And Eva said that sometimes in the middle of a business meeting, my little brother would call down for advice. He'd say, "Billy kicked me, should I kick him back?" So that was one of the things that happened. But we were comfortable in the studio, and always comfortable around her work. There was always stuff going on in the studio. And every Easter and every Christmas, she threw a big party for us separately, me and my brother, where the whole class was invited. And it was an arts and crafts party. And at Easter, we would decorate eggs with faces and with hats and collars. And at Christmas, we'd make Christmas decorations. Here is Eva with me and my brother John, who is 4 years younger than I am. And it's actually out in back of this house. I don't know what she was designing, but we were participating. Sometimes we actually went to the factories with her. Anyway, so that was the studio. When she did go to the factories, my grandmother was always there, her mother, to take care of us. Grandmother always lived either next door or nearby, so we never felt abandoned. Actually, I have to speak for myself. I don't want to speak for my brother. And I would say our household was not what you'd call very strictly regimented. It was kind of spontaneous. For example, Eva loved to cook. And she would cook stews and soups, and never quite at the same time. And in fact, for me, it was always a treat to go up to my cousin's house. They lived a block away, and have dinner there, because it would be served exactly at 6 o'clock, and everything was separate neatly on the plates. And when we grew up, my cousin told me that his great treat was to come to our house for dinner, because you never knew when you'd get it, and you didn't know if you'd have goulash or ham and eggs or whatever. She also made these spur of the moment cakes. I don't know, I still don't know how. She loved cooking, but she hated housework. And in my memory, we always had either a part-time or full-time household person to do the housework. I remember, and recently I was looking through some old papers, and I found a little handwritten budget written out by her when they had first come to America. She just had started teaching at Pratt. And it was $8 and $6 and $2, but there was a tiny amount for a housekeeper. So that started a long time ago. I think of Eva as a kind of warm and cuddly mother. And she invented something called the tumbalone. She called it the tumbalone. It meant a time alone. And it was 15 or 20 minutes, which we would spend just talking to her alone, separately, of course, my brother and me, before going to sleep. Sometimes the tumbalone took place in the park, Riverside Drive, sometimes in bed, but we would always just have a quiet talk, this tumbalone. Later, when we were reading stories, she didn't read us children's literature, but she carefully chose short stories by O. Henry and by Chekhov, which I remember exactly today. And since we were both born, she invented little poems and songs that she sang to us. And the poems continued throughout our childhood. Some of them were sort of educational. It was a way of imparting her wisdom. And I want to end by reading you part of a poem that she wrote to me, or telling you that she wrote to me on my 10th birthday. And what she said was, "Jeannie, now that you are old enough, I thought you might want to start to figure out how to live right. But how can you if you don't know precisely where and when life is? So I made this poem for your birthday." And this is how it goes. "It's life you are living, and life is here. It's not sometime later, it's now, Jeannie dear. It's life when the sun shines, it's life when it rains. It's not where you're going, but riding the trains. Don't think that once will come a day when all be rich and smart, and laughter will be here to stay, and then real life will start." And this is my favorite verse. "Between the not yet gilded past and the time for which we strive lies, unnoticed and not to last, the moment, which is life." That's it. Back to you, Taylor.
Jean, thank you for a fascinating presentation.
I'm so glad. It was a real pleasure.
I'm thrilled, and I'm just wondering if anyone has any questions or would like to say anything before we close out our program tonight. Is there...
Daily, I'd like to
Yes.
show something. I moved to San Francisco into my mother's house, and when I was searching through the cupboards and stuff, I found this design, which is an Eva Zeisel one from Hallcraft.
It is Hallcraft. Some of those designs were done under her supervision, but not all of them. And I know that design, but I don't know if that was one of hers. I don't think so.
It may be her drawings, though.
Well, maybe.
Wonderful. It's
That's nice that you have that.
Was there anybody else that wanted to comment or had a question for Jean?
Can you hear me? Am I muted?
Yes.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
I'll never forget, I was at the flea market here in New Jersey on a 1-degree day, and there was nobody at any of the booths. And I'm walking past the booth, and I hear two guys talking, and they say, "I heard Eva Zeisel." I said, "How do I hear Eva Zeisel in the middle of an empty flea market at a 0-degree day?" It was bitter cold. There was nobody there. And it was very strange that I would hear her name in this nowhere's land out in the cold. I'll never forget it. Anyway, it was a wonderful presentation.
Excuse me, you have to say how you knew her.
Oh, I knew she was a patient, but that's beside the point.
This was our beloved dentist, and Eva was his patient.
And my daughter is watching, as is Jessica. I'm pretty sure she.
Oh, that's nice.
I also notified a friend of mine that was very much interested in your mother's work. I hope she got the message and was able to listen.
I hope
I
so.
hope there's a tape of this that we can see it and recommend it to friends, because it was.
I think, Daly, is this going to be recorded? Is this something people can get later?
Yes, this is being recorded, and if anyone wants to send me an email, I will send them the recording.
And I'm
Wow.
waiting for the day when Eva is on a stamp, which she's long overdue, on a U.S. postage stamp.
I think that's a good idea. We'll send it in.
She's long overdue.
When I read Eva's stuff and about her, one of the things I was the most struck by was her approach to softness. I remember a thing about softness and hard and curves, and I wondered if you could talk about that for a minute.
Her designs, her later designs, were always curves, and they were, well, at one point, at a I think her 90th or 100th birthday party, somebody at the Museum of Modern Art said, Philip Johnson's designs were inspired by machines, and Eva Zeisel's designs were inspired by babies' bottoms.
Thank you. Okay.
So I think there was always the human body. By the way, her designs were very much made to be touched, not just looked at. And the curves were always exactly right. If there was something like a copy of Eva's thing, even if you didn't know her designs, you could see that the curve was off. She had a gift of making the right curves. So I think much was inspired by the human body. And that's probably where, and nature, that's probably where the curves came from. But the fact that they were the right curves was just her gift, I think.
Thank you.
Can I say something?
Mhm.
Hi, Jeannie, it's Margie.
Hi.
I just want to mention that year, I can't remember, I mean, John would remember how old Eva was, but she was certainly in her late 90s when she, she gave a talk at the Montreal Museum of Fine Arts. And she came in, she was elegant on the stage. The room was packed full. But the reason I'm mentioning this is because the room was packed full of young people.
Young people.
Young people. Her work continues to inspire. It was fascinating just to look around and see very little gray hair. It was a lot of young people.
That's interesting, and that's very nice.
Yeah, it was.
The influence was very strange. One time, the head of design at Nike sneakers said that he had his young designers study Eva's work.
Jeannie,
Another example.
can I say something quickly? Can you?
Yeah.
Would you say something about the video, Throwing Curve?
The which? Throwing curves, yes.
Yes.
You want me to say something about it?
Yes, can you say
Yeah.
something about it?
Sure. I don't remember how many years ago it was done, but Jill Johnstone, who had Kenobi Films, made a film about Eva, a documentary called Throwing Curves. And one can order that film. I think when you go to it, you can see excerpts from it. There's also, by the way, excerpts on television from a TED Talk that Eva gave, which is very nice. But the film, you can order. It's a wonderful documentary about her, in which she speaks about her life, many things, that, of course, that I didn't say. Kenobi Films, I hope it's on that list. I didn't want to make this a kind of shopping network and hawk these things. So that's why I thought we'll send it out separately for anyone who's interested. But that can be ordered, Kenobi Films. Is that what you want me to say about it?
Yes, that's it. I just wanted to make sure that Throwing Curves, I think, is such a great title, and I wanted everybody to know about it.
Good, good.
Mm-hmm.
So, I first met Eva in the summer of 1969
when I took a year off from Bard College. I was driving down South Mountain Road on a motorcycle looking for a place to stay, and I ended up staying in Eva's house. And that summer and fall, I met just an amazing number of people. And at the time, there was a saying for young people, don't trust anybody over 30. And I threw that out after that fall because I was just so impressed with the people, with Eva and the people around her. And the other item that I would share with you is, while I was staying in the house, Eva was up on the second floor and she was going through some drawers and taking stuff out to throw it away. And I said, why are you throwing this stuff away? And she said, because I need to make room for new things.
Oh. And this gentleman has been our friend since he was a teenager, and he is a wonderful osteopath working in New City, among other places. Right?
Yes.
Dr. Jewell.
Are there any other questions for Jean or comments? Well, thank you all for joining us tonight. And Jean, I can't thank you enough for a wonderful evening.
Thank you for
with so
listening.
much-
It was really a lot of fun. Thank you, David.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Oops, Dr. Ettinger's back.
Great evening. Oh. Did you say something? But
No.
Bruce?
Well,
No, we're good?
I would just like to say one thing, which is,
Excuse me, I have to introduce. This is my beloved brother, John Zeisel.
and first of all, Jean, that was a wonderful overview. But I also wanted to say that many of the people on here, John Stryker, Joel, Rick, many people grew up with her. And it's really a nice reunion.
This is true, and I believe that Joel once told us the story how she had finished. Can I, Daly, can I still speak?
Yes, go on.
Okay, yes, that she had, everyone had had dinner and she had told the kids to, the guest kids to wash the dishes. And she came down and they hadn't washed the dishes. And she picked them up and flung them across the kitchen.
Well, there's another part to that story, which is
Yeah.
we had a big party in the living room. Hadn't really slept all night. And she came down in the morning, and when she threw her plates around, she said, I made them, I can break them.
Yes, exactly.
And Judy Mason is there too, and
Oh, how nice.
and the Polani's are there. Everybody's here,
Oh, lovely.
When
So
That's
it
very
was a nice
moving.
way to get together.
right? And Rick
And
is
it's-
here, and Margie, and I can just go down the whole list of
Just
people that, I don't know if you see them, but
I
there's so
don't, but
many,
It's
so
so
many-
nice.
yeah, so many people are in the extended family. And I think when she was old, somebody, one thing that Jean did when Eva was quite old was make sure she always had dinner with somebody. So there was a book with 365 pages, and every page had the name of somebody who's going to have dinner. And what she did with each one was she said, tell me about yourself. And I think that many of the people on this Zoom have experienced that. Her interest in them, and therefore they're here now. And your talk was really a wonderful overview, and it touched all of us, and all of
That's
us
so
have been touched.
nice. You're right about she really was interested in other people. And it occurred to me that a lot of her paintings that she did when she was young were portraits.
Yes.
And that's connected to being interested in other people, I think.
Mm.
Well,
So,
it's so
Daly,
lovely.
thank
And
you.
it's Eva's spirit that makes all these people like each other. And I have to say that Brent and I inherited many good friends from Eva because her warmth kind of spread around, even if she occasionally threw plates.
Well, so thank you for doing that, and thank you, Daley, for organizing it.
Oh, thank you. I'm thrilled. I couldn't be happier. We were honored. And
In
thank you
fact,
all
there-
for
there's
attending.
there's one person, there was a Japanese person listening, and I brought some of Adam Zeisel's reproductions of Eva's work over to him. I'm doing some work with him in Japan, and so he came and was online listening to Eugene tell the story about Eva all the way from Japan. So you have a big reach.
Oh, my goodness. That's nice. That's nice. I mean, for many people who are in Europe, of course, it's the middle of the night, so it didn't work out too well, but maybe we'll send them copies.
I'm sure they will.
Okay. Well,
More?
good night, everyone. Oh,
Good
Good
night.
night, and thank you all.
Good night.
thank you.
Thank you for
Wonderful evening.
listening. Good
Thank
night. Good night.
Wonderful.
Here.
Bye. Thank you.
Nice to see you, Margaret. Hi, Rick. Bye. Hi, Virginia.
Hi, John.
Bye-bye. Bye,
Bye, John.
Kenshi. Bye, Kenshi.
Hi, hi, hi. Hi,
You're a
Barbara.
wonderful storyteller.
Oh, good. Well, it's Eva's stories.
But you tell them like she was here.
Oh, that's so nice. That's so nice. It
Thank
was
you,
nice
John.
to.
Kenshi, nice to see you. That was my friend
Thank you.
Kenshi from
Very
Japan.
nice. Good,
Thank you,
very wonderful
Kenji.
presentation. Yes.
Oh, thank you so much. You know, she designed for the Nikko factory in Kanazawa City.
Oh, really?
Yeah, in Japan.
I have to go there.
Yes. Okay, do we, what do we press to say goodbye? We have to press something.
Leave the meeting. I could end it now. I just didn't want to be rude when people were connecting with each other.
Okay, good.
Thank you, Jeannie.
Bye, Daly. Bye, everyone.
Thank you so much. It was
Bye.
wonderful.
Thank
Good.
you.
Thank you. Bye, Kenji.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everyone.
Hi, Jeannie. Joanna
that?
from Jamaica.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness, Joanna, how lovely. We should just say
Gosh,
hello to each
Jeannie.
other. Oh my goodness.
It's great to hear you.
Oh my goodness, how lovely. How is Marvin and Rosalie?
They're okay. Marvin is having a little bit of a setback with some issues, medical issues, but they're fine. Marvin is now 88, you know.
Oh my God. Time flies when you're having fun. Wow. Well,
I just can't believe all of I heard about Eva. I hadn't realized she had reached 105.
yeah, she did.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Well, I really enjoyed your talk.
Joanna,
And
it's
how's
so
your
lovely.
daughter?
She's fine. She's fine. It's so lovely to hear from you. Really, really is. We'll have to do this.
It's great.
You know, if I have your whatever it is, we'll do a, you know, your email. We'll do it.
Yes, you did.
Yeah.
You did get my email because that's how I'm in touch with you. I'm surprised I got through here because I'm not. This is the first Zoom I've ever done.
Oh, good for you. And it worked, right?
Well,
Good.
it worked in a way. The figures didn't come up very big, the faces, but at least I got through to hearing you. And my volume was a little low, but I did manage to, and I enjoyed it very much. I always wondered about Eva so much, and now I got a chance to hear.
That's lovely. So let us stay in touch, Joanna. We will.
Yeah. Let us do that.
Yeah.
Okay. All my love, and
Thank
love
you,
to Brent
darling.
as well.
And to Marvin and Rosalie.
Okay, I will.
Yeah.
Okay,
Thank you.
Jeannie. Thank
Okay.
you. Bye.
We just keep going.
Bye.
Bye. Okay, and now I'm going to press something.
Do you want me to end it, Jean? I can just end it for everyone.
I don't know if nobody else says hello. These are people, this was a lady in Jamaica that we haven't seen for years and years. So it's kind of a nice reunion of all these people. It's a way of keeping in touch, especially during the pandemic,
Well, at some point I wanted to talk to you because I had an idea for a follow-up program.
Oh, yes.
And that would be that for those of us who have some of your mother's work, we could cook and make some. I thought, I look at the platter I have and I'm inspired to make certain dishes and present them on that
And
platter.
show them on the
and eat them. So I thought, wouldn't it be interesting if we all made a dish for our dish and ate together?
Well, it might be very popular. After all, the Bake Off, whatever it is in England, is the most popular show. So,
and we could just share what we're eating and what we're eating on, and then we could refer them to Eva Zeisel Originals. And I even had the idea of buying some pieces and asking chefs, local chefs, to make a dish inspired by the dish. And people, if they don't have one of your mother's pieces, they could buy the piece with the dish that the chef made. And
what if the set is not made anymore? Because there is one set that is so perfect for chefs. It's got a kind of rim around it that you could decorate the dish.
Like a garnish or, yeah.
Yeah, but it's like a little moat around it. So it would be really good, except it's not made anymore. You can't buy the dish.
Well, some of them there's some that we could get on Etsy and then just sell it back to the person with the dish. Or if they just wanted to purchase the serving piece, they could, or they could get a dish with it. And we could just...
Yeah, I think we should think about it, especially during the pandemic when everyone's cooking at home.
Yeah, it just would be a free program and people could talk about their memories or just like a half an hour.
Well, we'll figure that one out.
Sounds good.
But I'm so pleased. I'm so pleased that I think it gave a lot of pleasure to a lot of people, certainly to me.
Certainly to me.
But that's so nice.
Jean, I don't know if you could see, at one point there were 89 people listening to your lecture.
No, I didn't realize that. That's nice. Some were, of course, our friends, but Terry had sent it out to her list of people from the, what is her land trust thing?
Yes.
She had a whole list of people there and sent it out to them, and they were strangers.
No, there was a lot of interest
Good.
in this program. So
isn't that a funny story about her having gotten everybody back to the house and served them on real plates?
Wonderful.
And there was an artist there now at that last show that told me the story because she was one of the people who had been invited.
That's
a
so
woman. Yeah,
wow.
She told me the story. And the other day I was up in the attic and I saw piles and piles and piles of plates. And I thought, that's the one she used.
That she used. Amazing.
Yeah. But another thing I realized from doing this, is it just you and me?
No, there's a few other people.
Oh, okay, whatever. Doesn't matter, no secrets.
No, we're not.
I realized that there was a theme in her life about large parties. Because the first large parties were in Berlin, where she had 100 people come to the atelier. And there were parties for the kids. The whole class came. So there were 30, 40 children. I don't know how many in the children's parties in the studio. But also she gave parties here in the big living room. There's a living room that's 30 by 40 that was built on by a singing teacher.
Oh, wow.
And she not only had concerts there and dinners and whatever, but she had a birthday party there. And then at one point she said, let's have a neighbor's party. And we invited all the neighbors. So I think she loved giving big parties. And that theme I only realized when I was making the thinking of the stories.
Well, and that would explain all the components. I mean, that there's, that's interesting.
She liked giving parties, big parties. And it was not a problem for her. She entertained very easily. she didn't worry too much
Oh,
about
I'm
having
envious. Yeah.
everything perfect. She was, and I have to say, I inherited that, and my daughter inherited that.
You're
We
lucky.
easily give a dinner party for 8 or 10 or whatever people, just without anxiety.
Mhm.
Yeah. And yeah, it was fun, I have to say.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Jean.
My pleasure, Daly. We
And
will
I'm
stay in
sorry, I
touch.
got a little glitchy there on a couple slides, but
I think it was fine. I think
Okay.
it was fine. And I think I hope people enjoyed it. I did a lot. And
Well,
and you'll
send you the recording, because when I send you the recording, you can see at the bottom what people commented, because you had
Oh,
quite a few
really?
comments where it said, Jean, it was great to see you. This was a wonderful performance.
Oh, well, that'll be good to see.
So you'll
Yeah.
be able to see.
It also occurred to me that I wanted to invite several people, but they're in different countries and they would be up in the middle of the night. And they asked that if it's recorded, can I forward a recording to them? So you'll tell me how to do that.
Well, I should have the recording in the next 2 hours, so I'll just send it
Oh.
off to you, and then you can forward it to whomever.
I can just forward it to whoever. Oh,
And then
good.
just click on it
Okay.
and you can access it.
Good, good. I don't know what time it is in Japan,
No.
but good. I will do that.
Okay. All right.
And thank you also for the what's his name?
Dan?
Dan. Thank you, Dan, very much for helping.
Thank
That
you,
was
Dan.
very important. Thank you, Dan.
All right,
Okay.
everyone have a
Bye,
great
darling.
night. I'm going to sign off and
Yes.
thank you.
Thank
I'll
you.
talk to you
Good.
soon.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.